we're doing a giveaway. It's not just another regular old BS giveaway, but it's a way to raise awareness to the Wild Sheep Society's Act Now campaign. We're giving away a Kafaru pack, a Whoopee, a Frontiersman Gear knife, a full set of Sitka Storm front gear. Hell, we're even going to throw in some shirts and a hat from our store. The whole goal is to get people to be aware of the Act Now campaign and really send the message that our community wants wildlife to be managed by science, not by whoever celebrity is yelling the loudest. To sign up, get over to our Instagram at Wilderness Locals and look for the photo of the sheep with the Act Now giveaway graphic. Get on it, folks. Let's make a difference. This is episode 48 of the Wilderness Locals podcast. Our guest is Laura Baylyx. Laura is a biologist who specializes in mountain goats. Laura provides awesome insight into goats and her work. We are very thankful Laura came on and really appreciate what she does. This podcast is brought to you by Kafaru International, the toughest hunting gear on the planet, bar none. Frontiersman Gear, high quality, completely custom knives made in the heart of the Peace Country. And as always, we're brought to you by Just Shooting Arrows.
Threshold of when you officially become a biologist is kind of blurry, but right now I'm doing my Master's of Science in Biology, specifically in wildlife biology. So yeah, I call myself a biologist. But
you're a biologist then.
Yeah.
Right on. And you specialize in mountain goats.
Yeah, that's what my master's thesis is studying. And so, yeah, I definitely know a lot about species now.
That's awesome. What made you choose goats?
It was sort of a luck of the draw thing. I heard about the project a year before it started, when I was working for the government as a summer student, and just thought that the animals were really cool. And I actually said to a friend of mine, like, hey, it would be really cool to do a master's on mountain goats. And he was like, well, I know a project that's starting next year, actually. So yeah, I started talking to my advisor, Dr. Adam Ford, about it, and went through the process of applying and competed for the position and eventually was selected for it. So that was really exciting and never looked back. It's honestly my dream project to do. So I feel really fortunate.
That's wicked. Did you grow up in the mountains or?
I grew up in Kamloops, British Columbia.
Cool.
So, interior girl.
Nice. And were you like outdoorsy growing up?
Not really at all. No, my family, we skied and we front country camped a lot, but never really got into hiking until I started my undergrad at Thompson University.
That's cool.
And met a bunch of people that were into hiking and the outdoors. And so that's how I found my people. I was like, oh, this is the thing I'm into. And so, yeah.
Right on. It sort of snowballs wildly out of control when you start getting back there. Hey.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So like to kind of start this thing off, I mean, I think you're the second or maybe third non-hunter that we've had on the podcast.
Exciting.
Yeah, very cool. Which is, I mean, it'll be a fresh perspective. I mean, like in hunting, we kind of get into this echo chamber thing, where there seems to be two sides. There's a side that's really concerned about the animal and the well-being of the species. And then there's another side that is into trendy and hip and cool stuff. And they don't always line up, and we kind of don't always hear people outside of our own space. So I feel like these conversations are really, really important.
Yeah, I agree. Sure.
Yeah. Cool. So you're a biologist, you focus on mountain goats, and you are mostly in the Cathedral Park area, right?
Yeah, that's the herd I'm studying.
That's awesome. How did, what's sort of like what's the focus with your study? Yeah,
so my study is funded through BC Parks. So actually the license plate program funded my project and all the research going on, which is really neat.
I have one of those.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. So do I. And BC Parks recognized this issue in Cathedral where the mountain goats were sort of becoming habituated or human conditioned, and were coming into the park and were not really showing a fear of people. And so they took it upon themselves to sort of fund this research to see why they were and kind of create management so that they can mitigate this issue before it gets too far, like it has in the States, in some parts in the States where they've actually had to remove mountain goats from these areas where this is occurring. Mm-hmm. So they're funding me to do the study as well as all the field work that goes on. So we currently have 10 mountain goats collared in the park. And what I'm doing is I'm using those GPS locations to determine their habitat use and movements throughout the year. So sort of seeing where they most likely are to come in contact with people and have that sort of conflict area as well. I'm also looking at how helicopters affect their habitat use and movements. So cool. There's a helicopter flight training that's permitted to occur in the park in the wintertime. Mm-hmm. And the permit is currently up for renewal. So they kind of want to make sure that they aren't affecting the mountain goats before they say, yes, you can continue flying in the park, because it is known now that helicopters do really heavily influence mountain ungulates. Mm-hmm. And so really neat work. Really happy to be adding to the lacking knowledge of mountain goats in the province, because there really isn't that much. And really happy to be sort of looking at a big game species through a non-consumptive use lens too, mm-hmm. which I think is really cool and really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. What's the biggest threat to mountain goats in BC?
That's a good question. I think right now it honestly is just the human influence side. Mm-hmm. I mean, we know that there is an abundance of mountain goats. I don't think that their numbers are declining in a way that's really concerning as of now, but definitely we know that they are very sensitive, more sensitive than other ungulates to human disturbance. And and they live in these really niche places where there's not, and people go there to do all sorts of different recreation and everything. So mm-hmm. I think that's the biggest threat for sure right now.
Yeah. Could the same be said for, many big game species across BC? Like you kind of see it like out in the Kootenays and stuff like that with elk, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're only starting to realize the influence that people have just by going out into the backcountry on these animals. So it'll be interesting to see as the sort of area of research increases and is better funded, how this is influencing like all the large game species as well as all the smaller species as well.
Mm-hmm. It's sort of funny when so I'll tell you a funny story. One of friends of our podcast in Colorado, and Colorado's much more densely populated than where we are. But they have quite a few stories of them being on a mule deer hunt in the middle of the rut, or maybe at the tail end of the rut. And, they'll have packed in somewhere before, many days in advance, and be glassing a ridge and watching mule deer in their bedding areas. And then a group of hikers will come along and be rolling boulders down the hill and doing yoga and just pushing them around. Right. And it's like, it sort of makes us kind of aware of how not just hunters, but how any kind of people recreating in the backcountry can really be moving animals around, right?
Oh, 100%.
It's great. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, definitely. That's something I'm really passionate about, is getting this whole non-consumptive or like that side of recreation to sort of realize the impact they have on wildlife.
Yep.
And get them to take ownership of that just as much as hunters take ownership of wildlife conservation, because like both have just as much of an influence on the way wildlife move and act and use their habitat as another. So yeah,
that's
talk about that.
That's an interesting point, and that's something that I don't know if I've heard that many times from the science side of things, that the non-consumptive user has as much of an impact as the consumptive user, right? Mm-hmm. The company I keep, we all try to we kind of make a point of explaining what we do and what we're about and what matters to us as hunters, or at least in the group of hunters that I'm in. And a lot of the non-consumptive users that we're talking about, they're often super surprised about, how careful we are in some of these areas. And like, when these animals are wintering, we make a point of not going into wintering ranges to move them out of them and stuff that's critical. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. It seems like there is a big, void in sort of backcountry education for all parties, really, eh?
Yeah, I agree. I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's one of those things I think will be hard to address, though, right?
Yes, I think so. I think that it was going to take a large group of people to, or at least larger organizations, to acknowledge it first in order to get the general public to acknowledge it. I know that in a lot of parks, it's not, I mean, in Cathedral now, actually, there's big signs up saying like, don't pee outside of your tent because we are trying to keep them out and goat attractants away and all this stuff. So I think that that's sort of starting to get people to realize that, oh, me peeing outside of my tent does have an influence on these animals that I think are beautiful and I come here to see. And if they really do care about those animals, then they should consider changing what they're doing when they're out in the backcountry.
Yeah.
And I think that that's an instance where it kind of has gotten to a point where you have to recognize that to try to mitigate it. But I think that we could start being pretty proactive in other parks and in other backcountry areas. If we just got people to recognize, the influence that they have on the landscape when they're out there, whether they're bird watching, mountain biking, rock climbing, like everything you do out in the backcountry, there's wildlife out there. So of course you being out there is having an effect on it. So I think just having the larger organizations recognize it first and having people recognize it then will, I think, kind of have a cascading effect on everything.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's funny too, like, I mean, you probably experienced this too, like when you take some photos of mountain goats or whatever, and then you show them to people that might not be, mountain goat savvy. When you show them, they're always like, what is that? Do you find that?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I, living in Kelowna too, I always say I study mountain goats, and they're like, oh, I saw those just in my backyard the other day. And I'm like, you're thinking about bighorn sheep.
Yeah, very different.
And they have no idea that the big woolly white guys live in British Columbia too. But, yeah.
They're so cool. I mean, they're so neat, and there's so much, like for us, from the hunter perspective, there's a whole bunch of training to do in terms of getting hunters that want to chase mountain goats a little bit schooled up on, the difference between billies and nannies and how to identify them. That's sort of that's a topic that I want to talk to you about, with like the importance of harvesting a billy over a nanny. And so like in our hunting regulations, it says, please try to shoot a billy, but the regulation is written as any adult. Right. And I know some places in Alaska and that kind of thing, if you harvest a nanny, then you can't participate in that hunt for, I think it's 3 to 5 years, something like that.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, which I think is probably a good rule, right?
Yeah, definitely.
How often do nannies give off kids? Is it every couple of years?
I can only really speak to my study area. Cool. And then there I've seen that nannies have kids almost every single year. Oh, cool. Like lots of summers they'll have a kid and a yearling with them.
Oh, awesome.
So I think that at least in my study area, it's not a problem of them having kids. It's a problem of the kids then surviving, because there's really harsh winters and everything. And yeah.
I think I thought I read like the number one cause of kid mortality was like golden eagles or something crazy. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely.
That's wild. Like,
which I think is, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Sorry.
Which I think is why they're so scared of helicopters, because suddenly you have this like massive golden eagle coming at you. That's very loud and everything.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's wild. Like something that lives high enough on the peaks that its number one thing to worry about is golden eagles. Like who would have thought?
Knocked off. Yeah. Crazy.
That's wild.
Crazy animals.
So, I mean, as hunters, it's kind of drilled into us that it's super important to harvest a billy. Is that the case?
I'd say so. Yes, for sure. Because the nannies have a bit of a harder time bringing up the kids and having the kids survive winter. If you take out a nanny, you're probably taking out the chance of, another animal coming into the population, and then so the rate of decline is higher if you take out a nanny, especially if you take out more than one. Yeah, so you're definitely hurting the whole herd if you take out a nanny for sure.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I mean, it is really, really beaten into hunters, but it's hard. Like, I don't know if you saw on my Instagram over the weekend, I posted a photo of a nanny with is this a billy or a nanny? And,
saw that.
Yeah. It was about 50-50 people getting it right. And then the next photo was, a photo of her with a kid. So
yeah,
that actually wasn't far from Cathedral.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So, is there any surefire ways that you know to identify a billy from a nanny?
The thing I look at the most, I guess around this time, it's probably more difficult in the fall, but that photo that you posted, I know was a nanny because she still had a lot of winter coat on.
Oh, yeah.
And I find that the goats down in the south region, at least, the males shut out way faster than the nannies.
Oh, really?
We go into the park in like late July, and the males will be fully shut out and be looking really nice, and then the nannies still look really scraggly and have all half of their winter coat on. So
she looked rough, didn't she?
That's one way I know. Yeah, she really did.
Oh, that's funny. I showed that photo to my mom, and she was like, "Is she okay?"
Yeah.
And I was like, she's fine.
Yeah.
She's happy.
Yeah. Just trying to get all that fur off.
That's funny. What about in the fall? I mean, like our hunting seasons generally open August 1st or August 15th and then run into the fall.
Yeah. I think for me, always looking at the horns, like the base and the curvature is a surefire way. But then of course, like you always have that billy that's hanging out in a group of nannies, and they're kind of a hard species to define in that way. So, you can even have like really, really big nannies that look like billies. So it's definitely really hard, but I think the horns are the best way to tell. And also, of course, if they have a yearling with them, probably a nanny.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. So let's get back to you a little bit and maybe hear more about kind of sort of the stuff you do inside the park, like kind of what your in the field stuff looks like. That's the stuff that I think is really cool. Like you get to go observe these things and study them for, as your career. That's so awesome.
Well, I hate to disappoint, but a lot of my work is done in an office behind the computer. Yeah.
I just assume you're always like hanging out of a helicopter. Like,
I wish. It's the days that I do get to hang out of a helicopter that really make it all worth it. But yeah, so when the project first started, we did spend a couple days up there collaring animals, which was really exciting. And then honestly, after that, with collar data, it just gets sent to my computer. So a lot of the times looking at these goats as dots on a map. Yeah. Which is sometimes boring, but I have to remember that the reason I'm doing it, which is really exciting. And yeah, we only really go out to the park if there's a mortality. And during this project so far, there's only been 2 mortalities. Tell you about those, I guess.
Yeah, cool.
So one was a female, and she died 2 months after we had set the collars out, and it was a perceived traumatic injury. So she had some bloody lungs and just sort of walked down to the bottom of a basin and laid down and died. And so we think she might have taken a fall or something and got some internal injuries and died that way. And another one occurred this March, and it was a 6-year-old Billy, and he starved to death, actually. And so we went out and we found him hiding in a tree well.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, he was so skinny. He had no muscle on his bones, and yeah, it was crazy.
I saw that one on your Instagram, I think.
Yeah. We got to helicopter out and find him. And it's really interesting seeing why they die. I think it's very rare for ungulates to die of natural causes. I have friends who work with deer and everything, and they're going and picking up a dead deer, like almost every week. And so yeah, these animals, like, it's really interesting to see that how rugged these animals are and how tough they are, and how, like, yeah, they just, like, no predation events on adults so far, and only natural causes. So
yeah, I had read somewhere that, like, the amount of mortality with mountain goats caused by, like, grizz or cats or anything like that is, like, minuscule, like, across the board.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, they're just, I guess, just so much higher than everything else, right?
And they are able to just scale those cliffs, so hard to get them when they're running up a wall.
Yeah,
so.
they've made themselves a serious pain in the ass to eat.
Definitely.
That's cool. What so, like, that Billy that starved to death, you've obviously only seen that once in your study so far. Is there a lack of feed? Obviously, if you starve to death, he's not eating, duh. But like how does a 6-year-old Billy go downhill like that?
We sort of think that he perhaps went a bit too hard in the rut and wasn't able to get his fat stores back up in time for winter. Down in the Okanagan, it was a pretty early onset winter. So yeah, we just think that, because I mean, he made it until March, so he was eating something, but he did have some stores, but obviously not enough to make it all the way through till green up. Unfortunately.
Yeah, that sucks.
Poor guy. Yeah.
Bummer. And so, like, I mean, this year seems particularly mild. How are your goats doing now?
I mean, they're all still alive. They're moving their way along back to their summer range right now.
Cool.
I was up close to Cathedral not too long ago, and it was still covered in snow. So I'm sure only now they're probably just following the first green of spring. So yeah, I'm sure we probably won't have a mortality this summer unless it's another old age sort of thing. So
what's do you kind of know the average age of the goats in the park there?
Yes, it's quite a wide range that we have collared. There's about 30 individuals there, about 30 adults, and they range from, I think our youngest is maybe 4 and our oldest is around 8 or 9. And then, of course, like yearlings and kids up there too. But yeah, the oldest we've seen so far is, we think, 9 years old. Yeah.
Is that like a pretty standard lifespan for a goat?
We think she's pretty old. I think around 7 or 8 is standard for males, and I think a bit older for females, of course. So yeah, we were a bit surprised that the old one has lasted so this long. So I mean, obviously she's still kicking. So yeah,
that's cool. That's awesome. And so, like, do you guys do like some analysis from Cathedral versus other areas that hold good populations of goats?
Not for my study right now, no. However, I am sort of talking to other biologists around British Columbia about what they're finding and everything. Another thing is that I think my study is one of the only studies right now that has collared goats. I think there's a couple going on in the Kootenays and perhaps 1 or 2 up north. But overall, I mean, not a lot of collared goats in the province. So kind of hard to compare that, but definitely trying to get my results and everything out to the whole province so that it's relevant and we can sort of help the province get an idea of what is going on in Cathedral so they can kind of compare it to their areas too.
That's awesome. Is Cathedral one of the like stronger populations of goats around, or is it pretty average?
We think so, in the Okanagan at least. I mean, the Okanagan only holds less than 1% of mountain goats in the whole province. So there's only about 500 individuals, I believe, in the Okanagan region as a whole. Mm-hmm. So pretty low numbers compared to up north, where you can have humongous populations of over 1,000. But yeah, I mean, we have seen a bit of a decline. I was reading some of the historical records from Cathedral, and back in the 60s and 70s, there was reports of about 60 goats in the park, whereas now we have about 30. However, I will say that in the first year of the study, we had one goat move down south to a mountain range in northern Washington, and he stayed on there ever since. So we're assuming that there's other goats down there, because why would he stay down there alone, like especially during the rut and everything? So we think that there might be some cross-population movement, which is really interesting. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a strong population so far, for sure.
It's cool. So one of the things that I have written down on my notepad here for you, Laura, is how do hunters help your research, and how do hunters help the goat population? What can we do?
Oh man,
is that a loaded question or what?
I don't know. I don't think so. Just haven't really thought about it before. I think I think like I partner with the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance. Mm-hmm. They've given us a lot of help, as well as the Wild Sheep Society BC has supported me a lot. And so I think just supporting those organizations that donate so much to conservation, and yeah, just sort of push for more mountain goat research, because really there isn't that much in the province. Yeah. And I think that right now we do have the opportunity to be proactive with mountain goat management, and the fact that like we know that the populations are healthy, and we know that there's a lot of them. So if a decline did start happening, or if there was an issue with mountain goats, we'd be able to catch it early on with more research, which I think is really important.
Yeah, it would certainly be nice for if something like Movi started happening with goats. It would be sure nice to be on the front end of it, in front of it, instead of trying to play catch up like we are with sheep, right?
Exactly. I mean, I know all of my individuals were tested for Movi and all came back negative. So any mountain goats that are being captured and sampled in the province are being tested for Movi.
Cool.
But I mean, even just like anything, even just like tracking what climate change is doing to them, or tracking what like helicopters or recreation is doing to them, is just so important moving forward. So
that's awesome.
It's always good to have that baseline data. And I think pushing for more mountain goat research is really important. Mm-hmm. And also really fun for whoever gets to do it. So
yeah. There's Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance. I think it's next weekend, June 22nd. I want to say Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance has a goat count here in the Fraser Valley in Chilliwack, which is pretty exciting. Cool. Yeah. I saw that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of my peers, Jeff Agostino, organized it with one of our other buddies, Justin. And it's going to be, I think they have quite a few people signed up, and they have quite a few X's on the maps. And all of us that have been back up there have been kind of dropping pins wherever we see goats. So we should be able to get a good count. I think it's pretty exciting.
That's great. Yeah.
It's pretty exciting to be able to, participate, because it's like, mm-hmm. That's one of the things, like as and I don't know if this surprised you or not when you started kind of dealing with Wild Sheep Society of BC and Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance and stuff like that. How much hunters just like, we want to be involved in, like, we have like this burning desire to do stuff for these animals, it's like we spend like 365 days a year thinking about goats and sheep and deer and elk and all these different things. And it's like, what can we do to help? Right. So when this goat count came up, I think they were just like blown away by how many people signed up for it. Like literally everybody I know is like, I got my spotter and I got my tent. I'm ready to go.
That's great.
Yeah, it should be fun.
even just like the new natal app that the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations set out. I'm not sure if you heard Bill Jack talk about it on the Wild Sheep Society podcast.
Yeah, I've been emailing with Bill trying to pin him down here.
Great guy to chat to for sure.
Super nice dude.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think apps like that and all the counts, it's great to get people involved for sure.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll just correct myself here. The count for Chilliwack is June 25th to June 27th.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So when you kind of started this project, were you surprised with all the support from hunting orgs?
A little bit, yes, because I had never worked with any of the hunting organizations before. Honestly, I will say that before I started my undergrad, I was definitely one of those people who loved wildlife and was against hunting because I loved wildlife.
Yeah.
And then through my undergrad and my job experiences, realized how important hunting was in conservation. And then, of course, coming into this project where I'm dealing with a big game species that is charismatic and that people love. Mm-hmm. And all the support behind it, it's really awesome to see. And it's really like the support that they have is incredible. And how much they try to get my research out is incredible. And how much, how they want to hear what I have to say is just like really, really awesome. Mm-hmm. So yeah, really great supportive community for sure. I'm really happy to be a part of it in some way.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I guess, that's a question. I think a lot of folks involved in hunting. I mean, actually, to kind of explain myself here, a lot of folks get involved in hunting for food, right? That's how everybody starts, and then you kind of dive down these rabbit holes. And I guess one of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with and struggle to explain is, if you love these animals and care about them, how can you kill them? And then you have this conversation of why hunting is important to conservation. And so what I'd love to ask you from the biologist perspective and from the perspective of somebody that came from the other side of the aisle a little bit, where you loved wildlife and why would you want to hurt them? Right. Why is hunting important to conservation?
I think it's a really beneficial way to manage populations that is great for people and for wildlife. And I mean, we know that it funds wildlife too, or wildlife research, which is awesome and really important. But I think that as a scientist, like my job isn't to say what's right and what's wrong. And it's to say that this population of animals is healthy and this population of animals is hunted. And so therefore hunting is okay. And it's keeping this population of a good size and everything like that. Mm-hmm. And so it's definitely this thin line to tread and trying to teach people that you can love wildlife in so many different ways and still support them and still love them. And I think hunting too is just like, it's another way of being sort of green and like you're taking care of yourself and your family and you're providing food for yourself, just like you would growing a garden in your backyard. And just the whole concept of it is just like, there's nothing wrong about it. And yeah, it's just another way that people value wildlife, and it's just as right as another way. So yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's always interesting to hear people's takes, right? Because from my side of things as the hunter, when you get into these conversations with non-hunting folks, and especially non-hunting folks that don't spend any time in the outdoors, you often find yourself explaining, yourself. And like I said, sometimes it can be a struggle to put words to it, right? Without it turning into a argument, Yeah, I know when you were on Talk at Sheep with the Wild Sheep Boys there, you guys talked quite a bit about sort of the social license to hunt and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, I think it's very important for everybody to be able to convey exactly what you just said, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that right now people are just trying to get everyone's voice into the equation. Mm-hmm. It's clear that everyone likes wildlife in a different way, and it's coming to a point where everyone's butting heads. And I think everyone's just trying to get their voice into the mix too. And I think that sort of instead of trying to divide everyone, it's kind of an opportunity to unite all the voices, and the fact that it's like, hey, we all want to see wildlife on the landscape. And even though it might be in a different way, we're all trying to get after this same goal.
Yeah.
And I think that a reason people sort of hop on all these anti-hunting trains is because they don't know any other way to support wildlife. And I think that that's a place where hunting groups or conservation groups, I'd rather say, Wild Sheep Society and the Goat Alliance are great, because it's like, hey, yes, we like to harvest animals, but we also provide funding for landscape changes, which not only help the species that we're interested in harvesting, but also help all the other things that are on the landscape. And I think that people just don't fully grasp that. And I think that it's a really good time to start getting that idea out there so people can hop on this train instead of just sort of going with the one that's allowed in the media all the time, which is normally the anti-hunting voice.
Yeah. I often wonder if that voice, is getting stuff done and providing some funding and stuff like that, that's the part that frustrates me. Like if they were getting stuff done and helping out the scientists in the field, I wouldn't be that mad at them. I would be like, okay, cool. You're doing good. Great. I don't know. I don't think everybody has to agree, and I don't think we ever all will. I just think as long as we're putting the animals first, I think that's what counts the most, personally.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. What's your take on, I'm going to kind of go off in left field here, but I kind of just had a thought as we were having this conversation, because, we were talking a little bit about, social license and that kind of stuff. We're sort of, we're kind of seeing a little bit of an uptick of sort of grizzly stuff going on in BC and in Alberta right now. And now I think, I don't know if you're familiar with him, Mark Hall. He has a podcast and a Instagram channel called The Hunter Conservationist. And he's one of the few people inside of the hunting space that is not afraid to air scientific evidence that doesn't help the hunter's case. A lot of hunting pages and quote unquote conservation pages will, they'll pick and choose the data that they want to show people. Right. And one of the things that Mark was posting about recently was kind of all of the studies about grizzly bear harvest before the 2018 grizzly bear hunting ban went in. And one of the stats that he posted was that the hunt was actually designed to not impact the grizzly bear population at all. I think the number of tags was always it was sub 6% of the entire population. Right. And so he posted the other day about kind of the stuff going on right now. And he was trying to, I don't know, he was kind of gauging public opinion on if there's a correlation between what's going on right now and the lack of hunting. And he wasn't trying to draw a connection between the two, but he was just gauging, I think, the public's temperature. So I guess what my question is what's your take on kind of the grizzly bear situation in BC right now? And I know that's a broad question.
And that's a hard one for me to answer a little bit too, because I will be honest, I haven't really kept up with all of my literature readings in grizzly bears in the past little while. Yeah. Mine's been focused on mountain goats. But yeah, I think it goes back to this is the whole, like, as long as the animal comes first. And I think that people are allowed to change their opinions as more research comes out. And it's really important to see both sides and consider both sides, especially when it comes to science. A lot of these papers being published, like, are totally valid and sound science, and they are totally they're proposing totally opposing ideas. And it's really easy to focus on one and to focus on the one that you agree with and not really consider the one that you don't agree with. And so, yeah, I think that it's really important to have these difficult conversations and sort of open everyone's mind to the possibility of there being another side that you perhaps don't agree with. But yeah, I really enjoy listening to Mark Hall speak, and I really enjoy his page. I think, yeah, he really approaches these controversial ideas in a really meaningful and a way that really opens up discussion, which I think is important, instead of just pointing fingers.
Yeah, he's great. I sent him a text the other day and just said, like, man, you post the best stuff. Like, it always gets me thinking, and I think it's so necessary, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's really easy to get stuck in your own train of thought, especially when you're talking to a bunch of people who all share your same opinion. It's really important to have that opposite idea in there too, to consider why you're thinking that way.
So true. Like that's kind of what I was saying at the head of this, like the echo chamber that us hunters live inside. I mean, it's fun to have everybody agree with you all the time, but I don't think it's productive, is it? Like,
yeah, you're not going to get anywhere with that.
Yeah. Okay, so mountain goats, back on track here a little bit. What sort of what draws you to mountain goats? I mean, like I know you said you sort of luck of the draw. You kind of lucked out getting in with them, but or studying them rather. But what is it that keeps you excited about studying mountain goats?
I think it's just my love for mountain ungulates, and I also just love the alpine. So I think they live in the wildest places, and they are just the wildest animals ever. And so I love studying them. And also just how sensitive they are to human disturbance, and how important it is to understand that. But yeah, I think my biggest draw to mountain ungulates was just I first worked with bighorn sheep, and then was introduced to mountain goats.
Oh, cool.
I think, just seeing those species and how tough they are and how rugged they are in the landscape to live in is just really admirable. And I think that they're the coolest ungulate. So
there's a bunch of sheep guys just screaming at the dash of their car right now.
Not sorry.
No, right? Where did you work on bighorns?
So I got and I was hired on as a summer student.
Sorry, Laura, I lost you for a second there.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I got my first big break with wildlife biology in the summer of 2017 when I worked for the ministry in Penticton.
Cool.
And there is a big disease research project going on there where they're studying sort of how to stop the spread of Serapes ovis in the herds down in the Okanagan. I'm not sure if you've heard of Serapes ovis, but it's like a mite that causes mange in the ears, and they're trying to figure out how to take it off the landscape and also what it's doing to the herd there. So I got my hands on all these wild bighorn sheep, which I was just like, it was my dream come true. It was like the best summer of my whole life. And from that, I also got to go up to Cathedral for the first time actually that summer too, and got to sort of count the herd there just as like a preliminary sort of idea for herd numbers for the research actually that I'm doing now. So that was really cool. And yeah, I went up to Cathedral, which is this incredible, beautiful park, like by far the top 3 best views I've ever seen in my life. And just like got to see these really awesome animals. up close and personal. And so ever since then, I kind of fell in love with them. And yeah, here we are today.
You're gonna have to change your Instagram to Goat Girl.
It's yeah, my friends call me the Goat Queen sometimes.
That's awesome.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, bighorns are really fun too, but you can see bighorns from the highway.
Yeah.
How often do you get to see goats from the highway? Like,
yeah,
like almost never.
Yeah, exactly.
They're so fun. That's cool. Yeah, I can't remember who I was talking to on this podcast, but I was saying, like, man, whenever we're out and like you look up and you see the white speck way up high, you like immediately sit down, break out the spotting scope, and just spend the rest of your afternoon hanging out, like looking at the man. They're just so stinking cool. Like
they are.
Yeah, and how they move, and it's funny because I don't know. I don't find mountain goats skittish, really. Like they don't really peel off on you because they're always so far away, or they're like in such rough and tumble terrain. They're like, you can't get to me. Yeah, exactly. They have not worried at all. Have some attitude, yeah.
Yeah, and the kids are just so cute.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, what else? What else is important? What else should we cover here? Right. Is there anything pressing with mountain goats in BC right now?
Oh man.
I know.
I don't think so. I think there is a lot of research going on how helicopters affect mountain goats, which I think is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at like heli skiing and all that sort of thing, on how it affects their movements and habitat use and everything. So I think that will be a really big opener into sort of how helicopters will affect other ungulates and everything like that. So I think that's the biggest thing going on with mountain goat research in British Columbia, which I'm really stoked to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah, that I mean, that is really cool. Like you sort of answered all of my questions in one foul swoop there with, which is good. I mean, it's cool. It's great to hear that you're out there doing good work, and I hope you get to spend more time in the field here soon instead of at that computer desk. And your Instagram is great. I love checking out the goat photos and stuff. So
yeah, thanks.
For sure. Cool. Okay. Well, let's we can put a pin in this one. And Laura, thanks so much for spending some time on the phone with me. And do you want folks to find you or no?
I mean, sure. I'm currently looking for a job too. So if there's any companies out there looking for wildlife biologists, I will soon be graduating.
There you go.
But yeah, on Instagram, Laura Baylyx, I sometimes post photos of fieldwork, and a lot of other really cool grad student work going on out there as well. A lot of awesome stuff coming out of my lab, Adam Ford's Wildlife Restoration Ecology Lab.
Mm-hmm.
Got students working on deer and cougars and chronic wasting disease and wolves in the Pacific Rim.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of awesome research happening in the province. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. Are you up to speed on the CWD stuff in BC?
No.
Yeah.
But I know a guy you can talk to if you want to know more.
Yeah, I've what's her name? Caitlin Nichols? Is that her name?
I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely you know what? I'd love to talk to any and everybody that will talk to me about this stuff, and from the perspective of a non-hunter. I love it.
Yeah.
No, it's cool.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's meaningful. I think it's really important, and I think it's good for us to get a grasp on how we can have these conversations and have them in meaningful, thoughtful ways with people that might not be hunters, right?
Mm-hmm. Time to unite all the sides.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave us a review. If you want to support the podcast, please check out the gear on our website at wildernesslocals.net.